Congratulations, you got Echo. We're pumped to have you on board with us. And my name is Andre.
And I'm Hailey.
And so today we're going to be walking you through how you just set up outcomes inside of Echo. This is kind of this core foundational idea. And so what Hailey and I are going to do is I'm going to play the role of the expert on Echo, and Hailey is going to play the role of somebody who's just really never seen Echo. So she's maybe a lot like you, a new customer who's just come on board, and I'm going to teach Hailey about outcomes, and hopefully in this process you'll get some answers of maybe some of the questions you had as well. So welcome to Echo.
Thank you.
So let me hop over and we'll go to our screen. And here, what I'm going to show you and what I want you to focus on is this middle panel. This middle panel here is an example of some outcomes. Now, maybe the first question you have is, do your outcomes have to be the same as someone else's? And the answer is no. Your outcomes can be just for you, whatever you want them to be. And so in this example, this ministry is very evangelistic. So they're focused on salvation. They're breaking apart the concept of salvation and rededication, a gospel presentation, a spiritual conversation, other, no response, and language barrier. So before we get into some details, let me just explain the mechanics of what we need to do. So we need to have a title, something like salvation, rededication, and then we need to have a description. And that's just some context so that as your users are using Echo, even if they're new, they can read that and kind of get familiar with like, oh, okay, that's what this answer is. That's why I should pick this particular answer because that's what the conversation was about.
Can you have as many outcomes as you want?
Yeah, great question. So you can, but we encourage you to keep the list small. Okay, so the problem with having like a ton is then you just have to realize like you may be a ministry, you may only have 2 users. You may be a ministry and have 1,000 users. So the more comprehensive you make this list, just the harder it is for everybody to kind of remember the nuance of what makes them different and kind of go to that specific one. So we encourage you to keep the list short and think of them as like top level metrics, not really detail in the weeds. So think of this as like the big pie chart that would show you like if you had only one graph and a funder or a ministry partner, somebody comes to you and they're like, hey, what are your conversations about? Like, what are you guys doing as a ministry? This would be that, imagine the single pie chart. This would be the different slices of the pie that you would have inside that. The other thing you need to know is as a ministry, you could have multiple languages. And so if you've got multiple languages, not just one, then you're going to need to supply to us those outcomes in each of those languages. So like we had salvation as an example, you would have to give us salvation and that description in English, and then as an example, if you're in English, and then any other languages that you're using Echo in. And so just think of like an Excel spreadsheet would be great. And just kind of here's the different languages that you use, the top level description, title, and then the description in each of those languages. So you can have as many as you want. You should keep the list small. Think of a pie chart. You don't want to have a ton of slices. It kind of becomes meaningless if it's just, tiny slivers. And then the second thing is you really can't change them. So that probably doesn't feel good, does it?
No.
Yeah. And so the reason we've set that up like that is because we've just found that 2 things. One is it's going to kind of help force you to pick outcomes that really are the outcomes that you're trying to measure as a ministry. But number 2, it will distort your reporting if you're always changing this. So if you're constantly changing your outcomes, then historically you can't go back and look. So if like 6 months from now you add an outcome, well, then that means 6 months before that, it'll look as if none of that ever happened, right? Because that wasn't a choice before that. So we really want to push you hard to have outcomes that are the top of your, the most macro high level of like a view of your organization to see what you have inside it.
So
yeah.
how hard would it be to change an outcome?
Yeah. So you have to contact us. So we don't give you a way to do that inside of Echo. That's something that we would do for you. So there's some level of pain if you've got to contact us to go through and do it. We can totally do it. We've done it before, and there's times that we can do it. But as a general concept, we're like, we can't change them. And we're just saying that to really force you to spend some time thinking through these. If you're not first of all, if you are an evangelistic ministry, then maybe these outcomes that you see here are probably a pretty good list. This list has actually worked in some combination. Not everyone has salvation and rededication separated. Sometimes it's just salvation, or sometimes it's profession of faith is sometimes what some people use. This language barrier was specific to this. We call each customer a tenant, like a tenant in an apartment. You're a tenant inside of Echo. And so this was in here because they were getting tons of traffic really cheap, but that traffic didn't speak English. And so what was happening out of that is this particular ministry had a primarily English usage of it at the time. And so they were getting really cheap clicks like Google AdWords and things like that. They were getting a lot of people coming to them, but the language barrier was really high. So it was like, man, we don't speak whatever their native language is. And so that being put in there, it's kind of an interesting thing. It's still there, but now they've kind of fixed that. So they went back and showed their ad department, like, yeah, we got a ton of clicks, we got a ton of interactions, people starting a chat, but it wasn't good because we weren't able to actually have the conversation with the people. And so since then, they've really changed their ad buying strategy, and now they don't really have this problem. So it's kind of a funny thing of like, here's a historical thing that still comes up, but it's not at the beginning. It was really used really highly, and it was used as a way to kind of help that from happening. But that's probably around an ad scenarios when you would do that language barrier there.
Okay.
So summary is you need to pick some outcomes. So in order to close a conversation, every single conversation, 100% of them, when you're done with it, and when we come over here and we click on this X and close the conversation, you have to give it an outcome. Everything has to have an outcome. You can't move forward without that. So even though you've purchased Echo, you've signed up, you're ready to get going with it, until you have these outcomes, it's just going to kind of put them in this weird kind of limbo state where they're not really closed out because an outcome hasn't been assigned to them. So this is something that we want you to do right away to look at doing it. And again, we need them, the title, the description, and we need them for each language that you want to use Echo in. You can delete them, you can add new ones, but we like to say, no, you can't, right? So you need to think of it like, I really need to concentrate on what these need to be to get them where I need them to be. And then the last thing I would just say about that is, again, think of these as the top level things that you're doing. This isn't like the deep dive of the nuance of the type of conversation. We're going to accomplish that with tags. So don't forget that we have tags. There's a separate video about tags that you're going to want to watch. And tags in combination with outcomes can help give you the kind of comprehensive reporting. So as an example, salvation or profession of faith, you may want to have some nuance inside that, and you could accomplish that through some tags. Or spiritual conversation as an example of that one. If you chose spiritual conversation, then you may want to have some nuance around, well, what did we talk about? Was it New Age, or was it, God and concept, or something about the Bible? So we could do that through some tags to kind of help do that. So there's a separate video on tags. This one's about outcomes, but know that you can get some nuance to these overall outcomes with tags. Okay? So choose wisely. Think of it as you get to choose once. And, of course, contact us if you have any questions. And when you receive this email, there's some contact information of who best to talk to on the team that's going to act as your client liaison and client rep to help you with it. But, so you think you're ready to make some outcomes now?
I think so.
Do you have any other questions around this?
Not particularly.
Great. Okay. So there's outcomes. Create those, and there probably was a document attached to this, but if not, we just need a simple spreadsheet of just here's the outcome and the description for each of the languages you want to use Echo in. You can always add other languages in later. One last important point, which is Echo is going to default to English. So let's say you're in 10 languages. You only give us 9 of those languages back. If someone tries to use it in that 10th language, it's just going to display the English outcome. So we kind of always need English as kind of the root outcome. Oh, which leads me to the other point. If someone does use this in Spanish, as an example, if they're logged in using this in Spanish, they're going to see the Spanish outcomes that you've provided us, the name and description of those. If they choose that Spanish outcome, do you speak Spanish?
I do not.
Yeah, so you don't speak Spanish, so that's not a problem with Echo, because inside reporting, it's no big deal. Echo knows that, whatever gospel presentation is in Spanish, it knows that's equal to the word gospel presentation. So as the Spanish user is using it and choosing those outcomes, it's matching them to the English equivalent or whatever other language you want. It's transposing across any language. So the outcomes match to each other, okay? So it really doesn't matter which language you use Echo in. It's going to match those together so you could still run your reporting in English as this example and see what were the outcomes in Spanish, okay?
Okay.
Yeah, great. So get started. Ask us any questions you have, and thanks as always for taking the time to watch this video.